Würzburg is a wine town in northern Bavaria. Baroque churches, a hillside fortress, a river running through the middle of it, about 130,000 people. Nothing about the place tells you it sits at the center of the world's money supply. But the banknote in your pocket, whichever country you happen to be in, was very probably printed on a machine built there. The figure people in the industry cite is 95%. 95% of the world's banknotes, run-off presses made by one German company. Season 1 went looking for the firms that print money, and we found them. De La Rue supplying both sides of a nuclear rivalry. Giesecker and Devrient, whose paper fed two hyperinflations 80 years apart. The Swiss house that makes the secret inks, the forgers who spent 3 centuries trying to beat all of them. Underneath every one of those stories was a layer we never opened. Somebody builds the presses. Somebody has to. This is Hard Currency, Season 2, and we're starting at the bottom of the stack. With a family firm that has been making printing machines since 1817 and got its start in a monastery. Friedrich Koenig was a printer's apprentice from Saxony with an idea most of his trade thought was ridiculous. Printing had barely changed since Gutenberg. A wooden press, a man hauling on a lever, one sheet at a time. Koenig wanted to drive the whole thing with steam. German printers were not interested, so in 1806 he went to London, which had the capital and the engineering talent, and spent several years there being poor. He burned through business partners. He filed patents that led nowhere. Then he found a precision mechanic called Andreas Bauer, who could actually build the machine Koenig kept describing, and things started to move. The Times of London took a bet on them, and on the night of the 28th of November, 1814, in a room the newspaper kept locked, Koenig's steam press printed the next morning's edition. The secrecy was not for show. The paper's own pressmen had threatened to smash any machine that came for their jobs, so the run was done without telling them. They arrived in the morning to find the edition already printed, 1,100 sheets an hour. By hand you managed 250. The Times informed its readers they were holding the greatest improvement in printing since the invention of the press, which on this occasion was not an exaggeration. Cheap, fast newspapers changed what an entire population could know and how quickly they could know it. 3 years later, Koenig and Bauer went home to Germany and bought a monastery. Oberzell, just outside Würzburg, had been emptied out by the Napoleonic Wars and was going cheap. The two of them moved in, set up their workshop in the cloisters, and started building presses. The company is still in the same region 209 years later. No press manufacturer anywhere has been running longer. For its first century, it printed words, newspapers, books, timetables, the raw material of a literate public. Then it turned its attention to a product the world guards far more carefully. A newspaper is built to be copied 1 million times. A banknote is built so that copying it once is impossible. Those are opposite engineering problems, and the second one is much harder. At the heart of it sits intaglio, which Season 1 covered in some detail. Ink is forced into engraved lines under enormous pressure and stands up off the paper in ridges your fingertip can read. That is why a home printer cannot produce a convincing note. A printer lays ink flat, and flat is wrong. Building a machine that does intaglio properly is a different discipline from printing. You need pressures measured in tons, tolerances measured in microns, repeated tens of millions of times on equipment a central bank will keep for 30 years and inspect obsessively. Very few companies have ever managed it. Koenig and Bauer bought most of the ones that did. In the 2000s, it absorbed the security press business descended from Gualtiero Giori, the Italian engineer whose intaglio machines had defined banknote printing since the 1950s. That same lineage runs through De La Rue, the fallen giant of Episode 2. Folded into a Swiss-based division called KBA Notasis, the acquisition left Würzburg without a serious European rival. The machines have names like the Super Orloff Intaglio. They run the length of a bus, cost several million each, and live in windowless halls behind access control. Governments treat them as controlled goods, which is the right instinct. Episode 4 of Season 1 was about exactly what happens when a state gets hold of the correct press and the correct paper. And once a central bank has built its currency around one of these machines, with the plates and the inks and the trained operators and the security clearances and the maintenance contracts, it does not change supplier because somebody undercut the price. It stays. That is the thing that turns a good engineering firm into something rather more important. Take two countries that loathe each other. They sanction each other, expel each other's diplomats, run intelligence operations against each other, and plan for the possibility of war. There is a decent chance both of them print their money on machines from the same factory in Bavaria. Season 1 had an episode about a company that printed for both sides of one rivalry. This is that scaled up to nearly everybody. It is a strange sort of power because it comes with no leverage anyone would notice. Koenig Bauer does not decide what a country's money looks like or how much of it gets printed. It sells machines and it services them. But if you want to produce secure currency at national scale, the number of doors you can knock on is very small, and most of them lead back to the same one. Komori and Japan compete seriously. China's state printer builds its own equipment. Neither has moved the center of gravity, which has stayed where it is for 200 years. Now the part that surprises people when they look it up. This is not a big company. Koenig Bauer is a mid-sized German industrial firm with revenue somewhere around 1.3 billion euros. The founding family's descendants, the Bolzer Schünemanns, still hold roughly 40% of it, and family members have run the business through 6 generations. Its total value on the stock market has recently been counted in the low hundreds of millions of dollars. You could buy the entire company for less than the price of one decent office tower in Frankfurt. Margins are thin. It has been through a painful restructuring program, which management named Spotlight. It fights for packaging contracts against firms many times its size. So the bottleneck of the world's physical money is a family business under real commercial pressure. In a town most people could not find on a map, not an empire, something a good deal more fragile than that. The pressure comes from the things Season 1 gave a whole episode to. People are using less cash. In the euro area, cash covered about 68% of daily transactions in 2019. By 2025, it was closer to 40%. Banknote volumes across wealthy countries are flat or falling, and a central bank that is not expanding its currency in circulation does not need to buy more presses. There is a second problem, and the company brought it on itself in the most admirable way possible. These machines last. A well-maintained intaglio press runs for decades. Build something that good and your customer does not come back for a generation. Excellence is terrible for repeat business. So Koenig Bauer did what old industrial firms do when their founding market stops growing. It went elsewhere. Most of the company's revenue today has nothing to do with money at all. It prints packaging, the boxes, cartons, labels, cans and bottles sitting in your kitchen right now. It does digital printing, industrial coding and marking, decoration on glass and metal. The banknote division, the famous one, is a minority of the business. The company that prints the world's money mostly earns its living printing cardboard. Management has invested heavily in packaging, cut costs elsewhere, and leaned on a healthy order book. Whether a 200-year-old pressmaker can keep growing while its most prestigious market shrinks is a genuinely open question, and not one I'm going to pretend to answer. But there is a flaw underneath it. However small the banknote business gets, somebody still has to build these machines, and there is no queue of firms lining up to learn how. For as long as physical cash exists anywhere and Season 1 showed how stubbornly it survives, somebody will be flying to Würzburg. What Koenig Bauer shows you is where the real choke points in money actually sit. Central banks set policy. Printers make the notes. Counterfeiters attack them. Ink and paper defend them. And digital money circles overhead, promising to replace the whole arrangement. Underneath all of it is a machine, and the machine mostly comes from one place. Power of that kind does not look like power. No lobbying operation, no household name, no headlines. A family firm that has been extremely good at one difficult thing for 2 centuries, and a world that depends on it without ever noticing. Machines are the first thing this season is about. Here is the second. Every note those presses produce is a claim. It is worth something because a government says so, and for most of history, that promise had metal sitting underneath it. The United States holds the largest gold reserve on Earth. More than 8,000 tons, roughly half of it behind the walls of Fort Knox. The last full independent audit of that gold, where outsiders opened the compartments and tested the metal, was in 1953. In February 2025, the President of the United States and the richest man in the world announced they were going to Kentucky to look. It made headlines for about a week. Then nothing happened, and nothing has happened since. Next time, Fort Knox. What is documented, what is disputed, why America values its gold at $42 an ounce when the market says $5,000, and what became of the audit everybody was promised.